Welcome to the Fixed Ops Mastermind. We are talking with Corey Kohler, Planning and Product Management Supervisor with Reynolds Reynolds. We're proud to be partnered with Reynolds Reynolds here at the Fixed Ops Mastermind. Today, we'll be taking an in-depth look into the innovation in business intelligence and the needed tried and true staples of the company. Corey, welcome to the Fixed Ops Mastermind.
Thanks. It is great to be here and to be able to catch up with you.
Absolutely. We're going to give everybody a little look under the hood here today, and let's let everyone watching know your history in retail, how you started, how you ended up with Reynolds Reynolds, and what your role is now.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's it's crazy like how big and yet how small the automotive space is. I chuckle about it even, talking to some of the folks in our campus facility here. But I had very humble beginnings. I actually started out as a porter at a Toyota store, moving and parking cars for customers and run the service van, that kind of stuff. So really just kind of I'm very much like to know how things work, how they go together, and so the advisor staff at the store that I worked at figured that out and helped me learn how to maneuver and navigate through green screen like terminals in era going back. And so as it turned out, on Saturdays, like when it got really busy, you start off first thing in the morning, you got 20 cars in the drive because everybody's trying to get in there and get their Saturdays done. So I would help write tickets, and the service manager caught wind of that after a few months and came to me and said, "Buddy, the guy said you're writing tickets. Is that true?" And I was like, "No, that'd be bad, right?" And he's like, "Oh, that'd be good, right?" And so he said, I'm gonna have you do something a little bit different." And so he had me start out writing service, and so I started doing customer work, and then figuring out how to come up with better processes for some of the things like our internal work, WEOs and due bills and that sort of thing. And so worked with the sales team, and then ended up doing most of the internal work as well, just to try and make sure we had kind of a consistent hand on it. Stood up a detailing department where we did flat rate times for the detailers. So it was a really good experience having a few different fixed directors throughout my course at Toyota, who really taught me a ton about the business. A few in particular that taught me how to read a doc and taught me how to read a financial statement and all kind of the things that went into it. But ultimately, I had one of the guys that I had worked with at Toyota, who had gone on to a couple of their stores. Ray Hall, he works for the data team here in the office. But he said, "Hey, there's this opening for doing some consulting on one of the programs. You'd probably be pretty good at it," and got me in with the hiring managers. And so in January of 05, I said, "Hey, you know what? It's been an awesome ride, but I kind of want to see what this pans out to be." And it's turned out to be phenomenal. I work with a team that does most of our service price guides, ongoing consulting, and training. And so I again like to know how those things work and all the back end of stuff. And so I think after a year or so, I was doing most of our product demos because at the time we did all the demos out of the office here. And then took on some additional responsibilities within the product. And so we had an opening that came up in product management, product planning at the time, but it's since kind of melded into a little bit of a larger group. And so my then director, now vice president, came and said, "Hey, I think this is a good opportunity," and went to our chairman and said, "I know it doesn't fit the normal mold, but we think this would be really good." And so I've been very, very fortunate. I moved over to product, I think, in 2014. So for about the last decade, I've gotten to to help try and guide some of the projects and the products that we have through the pipeline. And so I've got responsibility for a few of them, including our GoMoto kiosk platform, our Recon Vision reconditioning solution, some of our DMS products, like all of our scheduling pieces, and some of the communications elements around it, digital greeter, being able to receive a customer electronically in through the service drive, and some of the ancillary service applications. So it's been really exciting. And then over the last couple of years, getting some leadership opportunities with taking on some folks onto the team to help spread that knowledge around as
Hmm.
well. So it's really been blessed. I've got a great team that I'm fortunate to be able to work with, both here in Tampa as well as Dayton, Houston, College Station, across our company. We have thousands of associates, and I get to work with a lot of them just because we're always looking for better ways to do a lot of those pieces.
Yeah, it's a great journey, that story, and shows how many of us in automotive kind of morphed into where we are now. It wasn't the path we were on originally, and just kind of automotive just kind of absorbs you into it, right? And takes you where you're
Definitely,
supposed to be. Um,
definitely.
so Corey, now with your involvement in product management, talk a little bit about the philosophy of project management that you guys have there at Reynolds.
Right. So I'll hearken it even to some of the like core uh, project management and product management philosophies, but there's one that really sticks out, and that's the that nothing important happens in the office. It's getting out and being able to kind of take that feedback, and over the last several years, Reynolds has really doubled down on making sure that we're getting that feedback and that we're engaged from a product standpoint. So much so that all of our product team has been tasked, with being out in stores, and so we've got hundreds and by this point thousands of visits from our product management team, and really that's kind of that go and see mentality of how do we look for the things that are big projects, but also the little things, right? Like what are some of the things um, that on the other side of the keyboard that have just become kind of the norm and we're used to it, and it's like
Yep.
we see it and go, there's a better way to do that, and so it really lets us from the product side of things have a better understanding, and then be able to take that and carry that both into the product side of our efforts, but also even sometimes as feedback when we're engaging with others who are in that cycle, like OEMs and partners and things through that nature. So those have been tremendously valuable. We've also been working through dealer summits, so product advisory summits, where again nothing important happens in the dealership. So
Hmm.
when we're trying to have some of those elements that kind of come together, it's really good to get folks who will provide valuable feedback together in a room with others, almost like a 20 group, right?
Yeah.
But instead of talking like metrics and where we should be on numbers, we're talking about like feeding sometimes off of others around. It would be really great if we could do this. And we've had some really tremendous projects that have come out of those processes,
Hmm.
fixed variable business, like across the product management group, our kind of blended planning and design teams. We're able to take that and work it into um, opportunities for projects and products even that help us be able to get in. And it's really kind of that core competency of being able to make sure that we're in the trenches and that we understand what the challenges are, from a day to day. Like that's one of our core tenets, is to understand, have a deep understanding of what the business needs are, and what we can do to positively impact all of the details for a store.
Yeah, and that's super important, right? Because sometimes you were on the dealer side, I was on the dealer side for a very long time, and
Right.
sometimes there's that disconnect there between your partner and your dealership, and be, being out there, and as you say, nothing good happens in the office. Being in that service drive and understanding what the advisor is seeing and going, oh, that thing that we thought internally made it easier out here in the field actually makes it more difficult. And so we need to change that. We need to look at that differently. It's great that you guys are out there getting that feedback, and making those adjustments for the advisors and managers and sales managers that are in the field every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, as a product manager, what are you seeing from fixed ops departments as their focus now?
There's a number of things, and that's there's no shortage. I'll call it shiny things, right? And shiny things are cool, but you also have to be able to do really, really well with kind of the blocking and tackling. And that's, I think dealers really by and large have understood that. I mean, they're focused on a lot of the things that are going to impact the business, especially as you start to see, profit margins get skinnier on, the front end.
Hmm.
We got to figure out how to do better on the back end, and really with a lot of the tools that we've put together, from the suite of solutions, like that's really where, I think, especially on, on things like service price guides, right? Service price guides has existed since the, early to mid 90s. Was acquired by Reynolds in 1995. And it's kind of been this gradual progression, but it's tools like that that allow a dealer to kind of meet what that consumer's expectation is of calling the store. Right, you're the expert on this car.
Yeah.
You should be able to rattle off like all the things just like that. Well, there's a lot of complexity in today's cars, right? In 20 years ago, when everything took the same oil and the same spark plugs, and had the same timing belt and had all the, like, it was really easy. But fast forward to now, and there's 10 or 15 different transmission fluids and
Right.
3 or 4 different coolants, and the breadth of things that are impacted by how the vehicle's equipped has continued to scale tremendously, requiring a lot more depth of knowledge. And so tools like service price guides, being able to pull together all the stuff that needs to be completed for most of your repairs within 5 to 10 seconds versus the 15 to 20 minutes of walking around to try and pull it together, makes it an invaluable tool to have at your disposal. um,
Yeah,
the other place.
I was in a service director's office last week, and the advisor was on the phone. They put the phone down, and they called into the service director and said, How much is it for?" I think they were asking for an AC recharge on a type of car, and her response was, "You have SPG, use it. It will tell you everything you need to know."
Yep, and it has all the details that go along with it. I mean, it's the really cool thing is that, it was built by someone who was in a dealership that had a need, right? And
Yep.
that was, how do I make sure that I'm pricing things consistently, that it's not the wild wild west when it comes time to figure out the pricing, that it doesn't scale depending on how many hours we need to make for the week, right?
Right.
If the window regulator is 1.2 or 1.8, right? Like, no, it's like, it should be a consistent price, and especially in today's society where the attorneys are looking for opportunities to say, oh, well, you're doing things unfairly,
Yeah.
right? And we're going
Yep.
to, no, this takes all that out, because now it's all consistent across the board, and it's
Mhm.
based on what that vehicle is, what the time is, what the parts are. So it builds all that up, but it does it in such a manner that's near immediate. And kudos to our team. We've got a team of professionals, again, around the building in our facility in Tampa. We've got more than 1,200 years of automotive experience under the hood. So,
Wow.
like, there's a lot of those things that are things that you just you learn along the way, and that you can impart into the process as you're building the data. And they do a phenomenal job of making sure we have the right stuff on the right lines, and have it available, in a timely manner to be able to get it out to stores.
Mhm. And so you talked about the shiny objects and the tools, right? And having the tools is one thing. Having the right tools to access everything that's going on is critical. And so how are you measuring all that data that's coming in?
Right. So we actually do some analytics information that comes back in. We've collected, what we call the hits. Right. It's how many times we go in and access SPG on all the way down to a per user, but all the way up to a store level. And it allows us to be able to kind of figure out, like, who's doing great, and who do we need to go spend some time with and help get the most out of it. And that occurs between our ongoing SPG consultants that are based out of the office here. We've also got customer success services, which is our in the field team. They're going in and working with dealerships to make sure that they have the best utilization that they can for all of the things that they have in their store. And so we're continually looking at what are ways that we can help stores do better and be better. So that gives us an opportunity to feed that back in. Then when we get somebody that becomes a better user, we're able to then look at the next one that's coming up the line. But it's a process of using the tools that are there and making sure that the dealerships are using the tools that are there so that they provide the best in class options for a consumer.
Yeah. And so let's continue on the path. And there's so much talk around data, right? And how much data is available in fixed ops, and how much is being accessed and used. How are you seeing it drive decisions for both dealers and consumers?
Well, I think from a dealer's perspective, right, and this even goes back into some of the reporting and the capabilities that are there on the system. Being able to use things like the opcode sales report, right? I can see for a store that has advanced service, as an example, they can see how many times they've recommended something to a customer
Hmm.
and it's been declined. So now I can start looking for patterns in the data, right? Do I have a problem where nobody's selling alignments, right? Am I priced out of my market because customers know they can go and find that information or find that service at a competitor for a better price, maybe? Do I have a specific advisor or maybe a couple of advisors that aren't seeing success with it? Okay, well, maybe that's a coaching opportunity where I pull them in and say, hey, sell me an alignment, right? Like let me hear your pitch. And a lot of times you'll learn that they don't know the key things that are going to help tick that switch on the customer side, on the consumer side, to say, yeah, that's really important. Let me go ahead and agree to do it. On the consumer side of things, I mean, you talk about access to data like never before. Between all of the websites, the forums, you think about some of the data services like Carfax, and even down to being able to get regional estimates of repairs
Yep.
for a vehicle. The consumer has perhaps one of the most transparent options for being able to look at, hey, am I being raked over the coals on this, or is this within what I should expect to pay for the region?
Yep.
Because all that data is to some degree relevant based on the demographic information, based on socioeconomic, like what all those pieces are. And so being able to kind of step back and look at the data and allow it to help guide our decision making process on both sides is extremely helpful.
Yeah, and you talk about that access on the consumer side, and you can go back to the service pricing guide, and how much more important that is now. I can remember talking to advisors, 10 years ago, and saying, you got to make sure that you quote out of SPG, because you don't want the guy that owns a Taurus and two doors down, his buddy owns a Taurus, and they talk to each other and find out that window regulator that you mentioned, that Joe got charged 287 to put it in, and Bob got charged 359. That's a phone call you don't want to get.
Not at all. And that's actually part of what sparked the inception of service price guides, was that a customer had gone in and gotten a price to do a repair, went back and was comparing with her husband, right? Husband calls up, he gets a different price. And like that. So the husband showed up at the dealership much less than pleased about some of those interactions.
Yeah, and at that point, even if they get the repair done at your store, you lost, right? You've lost the trust. He got the repair done for the price that he wanted, but he's probably either never coming back, or every time he comes back, he's going to be skeptical about what you're
He's
charging.
going to be questioning.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
it's super important, because there's access everywhere, right? There's telematics, OEM connectivity, um, integrations with companies like UVI, and parts integrations with you mentioned Recon Vision. There's data flowing everywhere, and there's information everywhere that consumers can access, but also the dealerships. Let's talk a little bit about how important it is, and how Reynolds helps cars become frontline ready.
For sure. So within our reconditioning platform, Recon Vision, again, it was a solution that was built out of a need. Brad Schaefer was the fixed ops director for JM Lexus, which at the time was the largest Lexus dealer
Yep.
in the U.S. Um, he had a problem. They were selling 1,000 new Lexuses a month, which isn't a problem, but you have to figure out what to do with all those that you take in on trade as you're trying to get those back out and back ready for frontline. And it's very easy to lose cars.
Sure is.
We know that today, but you go back a decade and it was even worse. And so it was really the brainchild of Brad and his business partner to figure out, what's the better mousetrap. And what we found was that there were a lot of tools that were in the market that were focused on the front end, right? They were kind of driven by the front end
Yep.
activities. And Brad, being a fixed guy, said, well, it all happens on the fixed side of things, or closer to the fixed side of things.
Right.
And the reporting piece for sales is the byproduct. So that's really kind of where he started mapping out how Recon Vision was going to work. And so what it does is it takes a completely customizable workflow, so we can adapt it to whatever the dealer's processes are, understanding that dealers are all exactly the same. There's no two of them that are alike, right? In that regard, they're all very unique. And so how can we take those processes that we want to have happen on every car that comes through and put some guide rails around it?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the inspection based on the years and the mileage. Here's the things that we want to check. Here's the things that we want to say have to be fixed if it's something that's maybe a CPO vehicle, or something that has a standard that needs to go along with it. And so building in kind of those nuances into that process, and then being able to flow the vehicle through that workflow based on the things that get approved for it. So combining the inspection portion with the ability to tie it into services, then sending it for electronic approval, so that no matter where they're at, a used car manager or whoever the decision maker is on what we're going to do on the vehicle has visibility to what we found, and then the documentation of what was approved. Right, you can't expect what you don't inspect, and Recon Vision really is a phenomenal tool to be able to make sure that all of the pieces are adhered to based on the dealership's process, and that it helps shepherd that vehicle to the front line as fast as possible, right? Like, that's the goal, is to understand that there's cars that may take a little bit longer to get there for things that are outside of our control. If it's a stop sale recall, or
Mm-hmm.
we're beholden to another make to get the work completed, but the dealer still owns that car, right? Like,
Right.
we don't hide them, just because we're still going to be planning against the floor plan for how that vehicle's owned, and it's going to depreciate just as much if it's in somebody else's garage and we're waiting on it, as it
Right.
is if it's in ours. So making sure that we have visibility around what happened with the vehicle, what did we do, right? Being able to produce, hey, here's all the things that we did on your new car, and then also being able to make sure that we look for where can we be better, right? Like, you're not always going to hit it out of the park 100% of the time, but you can't get better if you don't know where your problems are. And if you don't have a really, really good tool to be able to track that, then you're really fighting the uphill battle, right? You're relying on people to do all of the things and make notes and record all the pieces, instead of letting the software help guide the process and make it easier for everybody that's involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I wouldn't say it's never been more important to get cars frontline ready quickly, but over the past 5 or 6 years, we've seen some situations come up that drastically change the price of used cars very quickly. And so it becomes more important to get those cars ready to go, so that we can face those market conditions head on, and not be in a lurch, if you will, wondering,
Yeah, no,
is this car?
absolutely. We saw it really, through COVID and coming out of COVID, right?
Hmm.
The vehicles that were produced, the sheer volume was down, and so all of your used inventory suddenly, it was way more important to be able to get pre-owned inventory out to fine.
Right.
And we had a number of customers that were able to shave several days off of their process. They thought they had really, really good processes when they came into it, and they're like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, I went back and talked to Tom, right? And Tom said, we're at 5 days. Well, when we started putting the clock on things, it's like, well, you're a little closer to 7 or 12, or
Right.
like because you're not taking all the pieces into it. And it's like, oh, well, we don't count that. It's like, well, when did you buy the car, and when did you have it ready for the front line? Like, because
Right.
those are kind of the two. Those are the start and finish line. If you're running a race, you wouldn't start the race halfway through and then say, "Hey, I did it in 10 minutes," because that's not how it works. So, the beauty is that because we're able to take in again that data, right, of when did you buy the car, when did you acquire it? Okay, that's our starting point. How long did it take us to get it into the reconditioning and inspection process? And then how long did it take us to get it out on the other side? We can track all those, very granularly, so I can see, do I have a department problem where it's consistently getting held up in a bottleneck, or do I have, is it the death by 1,000 paper cuts, and I need to figure out, how do I augment the process?
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into my next question. So how are dealers starting to rely on AI or digital helpers, mobile tools, um, to manage these processes a little better, right? Like that situation that you just mentioned there might be difficult for a human to come up with where the bottleneck is, but some of these AI tools that are coming out now are able to do that in seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably the biggest area we've seen it is in scheduling. Being able to quickly make appointments for a consumer is probably one of the more prevalent use cases that we've encountered.
Yep.
Um, Dealers and customers both have kind of been driving towards online scheduling much more over the last several years,
Hmm.
right? Just like we see everybody doing, more Amazon on their phones than they do on
Right.
desktop.
Yep.
We're seeing the same thing, just for a number of reasons. One is because it's in most stores. Again, going back to COVID and coming out of COVID, for a lot of stores, they had some attrition. People who were just like, yeah, not going to do it, right, or it made it harder to try and find people in the workforce. So what are the things that we can work smarter, not harder on? And so I think online schedulers and AI scheduling have both been tremendously helpful in helping offset some of the need, because the consumers, like most stores coming out, have had record months, right?
Yeah.
There's no shortage of people that are coming into the store that want to get things done. But being able to kind of manage, like, what are the things that are important? Are there some things that are self-service where I can go in and set it up myself? Or there's some things that are, AI driven, where I can take tools like Appointment AI and, call into the dealer and either completely offload, some of those basic oil change and scheduled maintenance services,
Hmm.
and then have that either completely take over some of those, or even if I backstop it, because you've probably been in just as many stores as I have, where you're out talking to advisors or service managers, and the phones are ringing. There's just not always somebody picking them up.
Yeah,
Those are all customers that want to do business with you. Like, we should,
sure is.
whether we're giving them an option to have, conversational AI with tools like Appointment AI,
Hmm.
or whether it's being able to free up some time on the other side of the process by utilizing communications tools to, text and interact with customers who have vehicles in, whether that's, being able to have chat or voice chat with, an AI tool to be able to set up an appointment, because I can
Yep.
do it in like sub 2 minutes, right? Like, even I can do that, whether I'm driving to work, or
Hmm.
I'm engaged in other areas. I can do that really quick and be able to do it, and then being able to tie in a lot of those other data streams too, around things that we know, right? You talked about telematics a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
right? The car knows when it needs service now,
Right.
and the OEMs are starting to feed those kinds of things up. So putting those into tools like Lane View, so that it's on somebody's agenda now to call and say, "Hey, Dave, it looks like you're due for your service. We wanted to see if we could offer you time to get in and get that scheduled," right?
Right.
And then even tying it back into the tools on the drive you mentioned, like UVI and Hunter and Traction, and there's a lot of companies that are helping to augment the process,
Yep.
where we don't have to have people involved in all of them,
Right.
right? Because anytime you have somebody that's in it, now you have to kind of measure and manage it, and a lot of these tools allow those things to kind of happen autonomously, so that we get the data and the information as the byproduct, but it just kind of happens. And then even, further down the line of, being able to have task assistance, right? Being able to have the AI and the digital helpers, things like Relo. We're launching Relo, which is our parts robot,
Yeah.
to do parts logistics and delivery within the store,
Hmm.
so that I don't have to necessarily have parts runners or somebody that's back and forth. They can help pull more parts if they're able to focus on those tasks, where the delivery piece is kind of the low lift. And so we're seeing really good results with that as well. And then even into things like, how do we build better integrations, right? The perfect one would be Recon Vision and Era. When we first acquired then Recon Track, one of the first things that we did was look for opportunities of where we could help with the scale of all the things that have to happen to get jobs onto the repair order.
Yeah.
And so with that, it allows us to, when things are approved, they automatically get added to the ticket. That way, it can be reconciled on the service side of things. We built out some parts functionality, but it was more so to be able to get more granular on the part numbers and the prices, so that we didn't have to like keep a notepad of all the things that we did. We'll be launching soon some integration that allows us to now add the parts information from like a pick list from the electronic parts catalog, and then send that over to the DMS electronically to see if we get pricing and availability back, if it's available on the local information, uh, so that we're not having to like do the dual entry that sometimes happens in that
Yeah.
process. And then how do we make it more seamless, so that when used car manager says, "Yep, we want to do all the stuff," we add those jobs over to the ticket and now send that over to the parts department. So all they have to do is, yep, roll it over to the ticket, right? So eliminating dual entry and a bunch of the extra effort that has to happen. And again, going back to where we started out, like, those are some of the things that we see as the biggest challenges, is double entry of information, double
Right.
entry of data,
Hmm.
having to do it in multiple places. Like, we're trying to pull as many of those things into that single stream as possible.
Yep.
With things like connected vehicle, we're able to dig telematics data so that a service advisor can view it, whether it's on their desktop, whether it's on their tablet, and have that as part of the conversational piece for the consumer when they arrive at the store. How do we use mobility with things like our service flex technician for mobile multi-point inspection? Like, I can go in on my phone and grab, all the things that need to be done
Yeah.
without having to go back to the desktop and, type it all in and take pictures through ServiceNav 2.0. Right? We've got a tremendous opportunity that goes along with that. And then, we're also going to be rolling out a product called Parts Flex Logistics, that is really geared around being able to kind of the Amazon-esque experience for parts delivery, right? Like,
Hmm.
how do we match that consumer expectation to say, hey, it's on a truck, and for us to know when it comes off the truck,
Yeah.
for the consumer to know when it's roughly going to be off the truck, like all of those elements, whether it's to the consumer or even business to business for wholesale, but being able to have better insights and better control over all those pieces of it. So using digital tools and AI and mobility to help scale, right? Like, those are a lot of the things that we're laser focused on as an organization.
Yeah. It's keeping advisors at the desk helping customers and techs in the bay fixing cars rather than chasing parts. Um, Corey, we've covered a lot of ground here, from you moving cars as a porter to now robots in the the service lane. So we're coming in for the big finish here. And what's coming next? What does the future hold? We used to talk 5 and 10 years in the future, and now we're working on 18-month timelines that include radical changes. So what do you see coming?
Yeah, I would love to say flying cars, but I don't think we're there yet. Even though the DeLorean supposedly already took flight, if you go by the Back to the Future timeline. But honestly, I think it's going to be this continued, digitization, right? Like,
Hmm.
I firmly believe that you're going to see less and less paper around service and parts.
Yep.
We're already seeing it in a lot of stores that have adopted kind of that paperless process, and it's one of the things that we look at as an opportunity for the store, because with paper comes, how do you store it, how do you manage it?
Hmm.
It's records and retention, all those things. So I think that's probably one of the keys, is like digitization of processes and better processes. Like, how do we put guide rails and guardrails around all those things that we want to make sure happen. And that's probably one of the biggest opportunities that we see is like how can we make things work together seamlessly so that there's not opportunities for things to get lost or missed. But B, how do we ramp up and empower users earlier on, right? Like we want to make things so that they're easier to move out of the gate, that there's not as much setup that has to be done,
Hmm.
where we're doing more with adhering the software to the process and letting that kind of guide it. But then I also think it's going to be doing more with less, right?
Yeah.
In as much as we talked about handing things off to some of the AI tools, things like Spark AI, our AI layer, we're going to rely on that to help augment quite a bit of the advisor process, right? Not trying to replace anybody, but
Yep.
help give them better tools at their disposal to be able to manage that customer experience, because the pressure to have an improved and cohesive customer experience, I think, is going to get nothing but harder, right? Like
Yeah.
the demand for it's going to get higher. The
Hmm.
OEMs are intently focused on it, and I know of several of them that are looking at different key performance indicators that they can help either provide some insight to or some oversight to.
Right.
So I think those are probably going to be the areas that the customers have a ton of places that they can go to. I can remember doing AtCon training with Mike Blanchard down for Southeast Toyota, and one of the things at that time, right, we're talking 20 years ago, is that the average customer is going to pass 15 to 20 places that they
Right.
could do business with to do a lot of the same business to come to your store.
Yep.
That's not gone down any, right? Like if anything, that's gone up
Hmm.
tremendously, because there's a lot of folks that are out there, looking to take that business. And how do we differentiate the experience that they have at our store, versus what they can go get anywhere else? And I think using things like Spark AI, things like Service Price Guides, things like Service Portal 2.0, things like Service Tech Flex, right? Like all those, the more those all kind of play in the same ecosystem
Hmm.
and provide that upper echelon of experience, are going to be the difference makers that customers are going to kind of expect. And being able to provide that experience that they expect will be, the things that help drive profitability.
I love it. We've been talking with Corey Kohler, Planning and Product Management Supervisor with Reynolds and Reynolds. Corey, thanks for spending some time with us here today on the Fixed Ops Mastermind. Any final thoughts for everybody?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of weigh in. It is fun to be able to spend time talking about the art of the possible. We've got a lot of things that we do, right? So even I didn't even scratch the surface on a number of things that we have. But if you haven't taken a look, be sure to reach out. Like we've got a tremendous team that's here, that's prepared to show you all the things that we can do, all the different places where we can have positive impacts, whether it's cutting down check-in times with GoMoto, whether it's clear and clean communications via email and text,
Hmm.
all the way down to appointment AI, right, for being able to do appointment setting, even if you don't have necessarily the space or the budget for a full scale BDC, or to outsource all the pieces of it. We've got some tremendous tools to be able to put at your disposal, and we really are appreciative of the opportunity to spend some time, talk a little bit about some of the things that are under the hood, some of the things that we're looking at from a solution and process flow, um, and just to be able to kind of chat. It's been fun. I appreciate it.
It's been great. And everybody, we will see you next time on the